I think that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Like
ours is Sonoran, Sonoran American, I imagine. But I'm always on the lookout for good beans. That to me is a sign of a good Mexican restaurant.
Yeah. Beans are good. I love beans.
Yeah, the beans. But if they don't have good beans, then I get worried. It's like, why? What happened here?
There's a really great show that I've been showing my family on Netflix. It's called Taco Chronicles. And it's so cool because it explores the cuisine of different regions in Mexico. And it's in some episodes are in English because some of them focus on Tex-Mex, but most of them are in Spanish. So it's just really great to hear like also the different dialects that people speak in Mexico because it's so diverse.
And it's called what's it called again?
Taco Chronicles.
Chronicles. Okay. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
watch it.
Maybe I'll brush up some of my Spanish too.
Yeah.
Well, we're at 10 o'clock, so I'll do a little intro for you, Gabo. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kayla Stein. I'm the Director of Ceramics and Arts at Sonoma Ceramics, which is part of Sonoma Community Center. And we're in Sonoma, California, if you couldn't have guessed. So Northern California in the Bay Area. And I just want to also acknowledge that we're on the ancestral lands of the coastal Miwok and Mayakama Indians. We're here with Gabo today. Gabo is one of our featured artists of the Surface series, and this series was co-sponsored by Amico Brent, who make wonderful underglazes and glazes. They also help sponsor some of our EQ Clay scholarships for marginalized individuals. So I want everyone to know about this program. If you know someone that could benefit from a $5 ticket, send them our way. The EQ Clay scholarships are applicable to all of our ceramics classes here for a more equitable and just ceramics community. So welcome everyone who took advantage of the scholarship. We're so happy that you're here. So I'll be screening the questions as they come through to Gabo. So send the questions to me in the chat and that will help her stay on track. If there's any repeat questions that she already answered, I will just reply to you in the chat with the answer since it's in the recording. And I'll send you a copy of the recording either later today or tomorrow, depending on how fast the internet is. And so you can watch that video for 2 weeks as much as you want. And that'll be a YouTube link. So yeah, feel free to chat with me. We are recording this and I'm going to turn it over to Gabo. Thank you so much. We're thrilled to have you here working with us today.
Hey guys. Thank you, Sonoma, for having me. I'm so excited. This is the first workshop I've ever done. So it's really exciting. So hi everyone, I'm Gabo. Y bienvenidos todos. También hablo español. And so I want to invite y'all that I do speak Spanish, so if y'all have any questions, si tienen preguntas, si no entienden algo, me pueden preguntar y yo les doy a response. I can respond to you. So welcome everyone. Welcome to my studio. You can see a lot of my pots back here. So yeah, I am streaming from Houston, Texas, which are the lands of Karankawa, Coahuiltecan, and Sana, Atacapa, Ishak. And so those are all the native lands that are here in Houston, which is so interesting because there's a lot of overlaps and there's so many people here. So I was born, a little background on me, I was born in Tarimoro, Guanajuato, which is central Mexico, but a little northern. So I was actually born there, and then my immediate family immigrated here to Houston when I was a little baby. So I went through school here and I went to high school and college. And it was really interesting. I really appreciate that y'all shared that website, Native Lands, because you can see like globally. And they're updating it constantly. But I learned that in my hometown, it's the lands of the Purepecha, which I had heard about that before, but it was interesting to see it again. And so I grew up traveling to Mexico quite often every summer. And so I think that really influences my work. And in my hometown of Tarimoro, there's actually local clay deposits there. And so growing up in the summers, sometimes my uncles would take me to all the factories where they make bricks. They're called ladrilleras. And so they would dig up the dirt, the clay, the local clay, and make these really red clay bricks. And then they would stack them all in fire. And so that really inspired me when I was in college, looking for my voice and my style. And that's when I decided to start working with low fire terracotta clay. Now I've just been developing the colors that I really appreciate against the warmth of that terracotta. And so that's what I've been doing. I've just been trying to be more intentional about my designs, and I love color and contrast. So I try to make my work really about those themes and those principles. Yeah, so today I have a couple of pots that I want to carve with y'all, and I want to show also how I utilize the wheel to paint them, because for me it's a little easier. So I guess I can show y'all. I have this pretty big piece. So right now I'm working with 2 clay bodies, because I do have several commissions that are this white clay that you see behind me. Boop, boop. So I'm working on a pretty big piece that I can show you how I paint on the wheel. But I do have some cups that are terracotta, and those I will show you how I use food coloring as guides to break it up. Because you can see that my work it's kind of organized, and so I think when I started exploring sgraffito, I was doing a lot of mandalas, like on my pots in college. And so my style kind of grew out of that, and making repetitive patterns, but also looking at the form and the way I can address the form through the surface treatment. Yeah, so we can get started. Shout out to Amico for doing the scholarships and for sponsoring. They sent me some free underglaze, so that's pretty cool. All right. Yeah. So this is a pretty big pot I'm working on, and I want to show y'all about some of my process, because I do plan these out through drawings. So I like to doodle and paint just about every night. And sometimes I just start with watercolor, not really knowing what I'm doing. I'll just paint some silhouettes of some pots, and then I'll go back in with ink and just really explore forms, but also like it helps me think about pots in a different way. Because sometimes I'll paint or I'll draw really ridiculous pots that are gonna be pretty impossible to make, but I just let it flow, and I draw whatever I can. So I just want to share with you. So this pot right here, it's gonna end up looking like this one right here. And so these are patterns that are inspired to me. Yes. So like this staircase pattern I recently found in this book that is about this indigenous culture that was living near the area of my hometown. And so, I was just looking through it, and one of my uncles actually gifted me this book from my hometown. So I was like, yeah. So it was so cool to learn more about the local art and the indigenous practice close to my hometown. And next time I'm over there, I definitely want to like visit. They have a museum. I think this piece on the cover, they actually have it at that museum in Paris. I don't know how to say it. It's like the Louvre.
Gabo, there's a question about the white clay, if it's the same temperature as the red clay.
Yes. Yeah. So the white clay is earthenware, so it is low fire. And, right now I don't have my own kiln. So what's been easier for me is to work with low fire. And so that's terracotta and earthenware. Specifically, this is a brand of clay that's available here in Texas. They mix it up at Armadillo Clay in Austin. and it's called Longhorn White. So it's really interesting because y'all see this clay and it kind of looks like that black porcelain some of y'all may have worked with, but it actually burns white. So like the pieces behind me, or I can bring an example. Like even though it starts off really dark, once you fire it, it does fire white. And this is just a big bisqued piece, so it's not glazed yet. So it's gonna fire this white, which is crazy because the colors will really change.
I think it's the talc in the, usually low fire whites have talc in it to help lower the temperature, and the talc has a lot of organic material, so it's gray. Yeah, so all that burns out and you're left with a beautiful white.
Yeah, so when I feel inspired about a piece, like I feel really strongly about this form, I'll do several designs. And then, you know, sometimes it starts where I just draw the pots and then I go back in and fill in the space with other stuff. And I work with like ink. I really like ink pens. And it just inspires me and it keeps me motivated to keep making. And also you can explore different, the way different colors look. And then, so this was like how I planned out like a pretty big commission where it was like, I know they wanted these two forms. So I broke down all the patterns that I can do. And I probably won't end up using all these patterns, but it just gives me a better idea of how I can, like once I have the piece slipped or underglazed, I can jump right in.
So did your customer choose the patterns? Is this like options for them, or did you choose them?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was based on an older piece. So they just sent me like what they really liked, and then I'll make batches of it, and then they get to pick their favorite one. It was really cool. They turned it into a lamp, which I had never done with my work. Okay, so we can jump right into this one. So with this piece, I will be using slip, but most of the time when I'm working with white clay, I do use underglazes just because the color is more vibrant and I don't have to do as many layers. On the terracotta, I've noticed that when I use underglaze, sometimes you can see, like I won't do a layer thick enough, even though it may seem pretty opaque. Once it fires, you can see the streaks of the brush. So with terracotta, I primarily work with slip. And with the slip that I do, I'll just mix it up in like, I do like 10,000 grams at a time. And I'll just mix it up in a bucket and leave it as like dry without any water. And then I'll just ration that off into smaller containers and mix in the mason stain. So I mix mason stain into the slip. And when you're working with slip, it doesn't look as vibrant as underglaze. So sometimes you think your colors aren't gonna come out as saturated. But once you fire them, you get a better idea, especially if it's glazed. Once you clear glaze it or anything, it'll look better. Okay. So with this piece, I was gonna use some of my purple slip and my blue slip. So you can use a banding wheel. I prefer to use a wheel as it's spinning to paint it. I can show y'all how I do that. Here's my purple slip. Get a brush.
Do you have a general amount of mason stain that you use in each color?
Yeah, so I'll buy the, they sell them by half a pound, quarter pound, and a full pound. Most of the time I just buy the quarter of the half pound, and it'll be like half of it will be enough to do like a container this big. But I do measure it out, but definitely sometimes I'll just mix a little bit of it back into it. So I said in the recipe that it's about 15 to 20% mason stain. I think sometimes I go into 25. And I've never had issues with the mason stain bubbling or anything. I've actually only had that issue with underglaze, where it sometimes bubbles or there's like air coming out of it. I don't know. Sometimes you get bubbles. Okay. The nice thing about slips is that you don't have to worry about, or at least I've never had the issue of like mold growing in it. I know some underglazes are super sensitive for getting moldy. My favorite underglaze is the intense yellow. And once it gets moldy, it loses that vibrancy. So I've been trying to be better about cleaning my brushes, but also I just portion out the underglaze into a separate container. And so you don't ruin the main container. So I'm just mixing up the slip.
Hey, Gabo, if people haven't made slip before, can you explain a little bit of the process of that? And is it easy?
So it's definitely like mixing your own glaze from raw materials. I wouldn't say it can be easy, but it has a lot of math involved. And I know that sometimes when I'm making big batches, I've definitely messed up the numbers and I've gotten the recipe wrong. So you definitely have to be in a headspace where you're ready to crunch some numbers. And you want to protect your lungs as well, because you're working with raw materials and it's a lot of dust and silica. And I mean, I've been out of a studio since March, so I haven't really had the space or the facility to mix my own stuff. But like I said, whenever I mix it up, I do it in a 5-gallon bucket. So luckily I still have powdered slip if I ever need more. But I made quite a bit when I did. I made about like 5 different colors, and then I have a bunch of underglaze too. So I'm good for now.
If people don't want to make slip, they can just use this process with the underglaze, right?
Yes, yeah, they can. I like to work with slip because I can apply it a little thicker, and it actually dries a little slow, well, actually a lot slower than underglaze. And so since I work in batches, you know, if I'm making 20 cups at a time and I put underglaze on all of them, by the time I'm done painting the last one, the first one's already too dry. So I appreciate slip because it'll so when you do sgraffito, you have to do it during a certain window. You don't want it to be too wet or too dry. And once you do it more often, it's like second nature. You just eventually understand when you have to carve it. But also you can achieve different textures depending on when you're carving it, because you can work with wet slip. But yes, you can do this with underglaze as well. All right, so I'm gonna start painting. You can see it's a little wobbly. So I'm using this foam bat that you can use for trimming really wide pieces. I like working on foam, so I don't. Most of my pieces have, here I can probably show you, it has yellow underglaze underneath it. So I have to be extra careful about leaving that surface or protecting it so it doesn't get scratched too much, because I'm gonna go back in and carve some stuff onto there. Oops.
Does your slip recipe work for mid and high fire as well?
So it's a recipe meant for low fire to high fire. The only clay body I've never used it on is porcelain. So I don't know about porcelain, but I have used it on stoneware, which goes all the way to cone 10. So I imagine it would be fine with mid-range. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably just the colors that you might lose a little bit of at the higher temperatures.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That yellow bottom, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when was it? I think I had my solo show here in Houston, and I started exploring like carving my name onto the bottom of things. I used to sign things with smiley faces, and then sometimes I would do a frowny face because it was based on whatever emotion I was feeling when I was carving it. And I embrace all emotions, so like I didn't see it as something negative, but I had a hard time selling all the frowny face cups. So I just started putting smiley faces on them. But now I think I'm going to do a pattern that's like an abstracted G kind of. I guess it's backwards. So I think I'm gonna start carving this one, but the other one is just my name. Here's an example. It's backwards. That looks pretty cool though.
It's forward
Yeah.
for us.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was in college, I really enjoyed playing around with text and text on pots and text in general. And I definitely it'd be really cool to be like a font designer. But yeah, I just developed it, and I know people really enjoy it. So on the larger pieces, I will carve my name into it. And then on the smaller pieces, it'll be a smaller carved design. So I like to use the wheel because it can just spin by itself versus using a turntable, you have to constantly be spinning it. So while it's spinning, I'll paint it. And I like to use these packet brushes. I sent a link for the ceramic store here in Houston that ships worldwide. Nationwide. And they have an excellent selection of brushes.
Those are the best brushes. They're my favorites.
They are. They're so absorbent. So I tried to focus on one corner of the brush because I'm trying to get like the crease right there. And you want to always saturate your brush. So this is a purple slip. It might actually fire to be a lot more pink, but I don't know. I'll see how it comes out.
How do you get that consistency of the slip right? And what is the consistency?
Yeah, I guess the consistency, it's kind of like heavy cream, but a little thicker. I guess like pudding, but a little more fluid. I like to have it, so with slip, unlike underglaze, I feel like underglaze is already pretty thin. I think with slip, yeah, melted ice cream, that's a good one. Yeah. With slip, you can always add more water if you don't like it. And so if it's ever too thick, I just add a little bit of water. But I just want it to where it can just kind of glide onto the pot. And then it's nice that it's spinning, because if I leave my brush still, I can actually get a pretty straight line that is working with the form of the piece. And if y'all have seen my pieces, most of the time, like they have like a collar of design. So this is how I do that. So I'll do about 3 layers probably. With underglaze, I would have to let it dry and then go back in and do additional coats. So I really want to think about the form of the pot. And so I'm looking for the shoulder of the pot. So for me, because, yeah, let me show y'all again what I'm doing. So it's this piece, right? So right now I'm just painting this top part, and then it's going to repeat on the bottom too. The pot is like leather hard. And I enjoy working with earthenware because I find that it doesn't dry too quickly. I worked one time with porcelain and it dried so fast. So I appreciate earthenware because I feel like it contains that moisture a little longer. So that expands the window for me as far as carving.
When you use underglazes, do you alter them at all? Watering them down or anything before you use them?
There are some underglazes that I feel like are thicker than the rest. Like my black underglaze has been a little, I don't know if the water has been evaporating, but it just feels a little thicker. But before I mix in water, I'll separate it into a different container so that I'm just mixing water into a smaller portion of it. I think you're supposed to use purified or distilled water, and that can prevent the underglaze from molding.
Yeah, you know, they inherently just get thicker over time too. So it's something to pay attention to as you start to purchase materials in your studio. You know, things do dry up eventually. But the cool thing about ceramic materials is most of the time they can be reinvigorated just by adding water.
Yep. So this is looking pretty good. I want to paint it so like can't see the striations of like the clay body underneath.
So your layers, are they drying in between each layer or not really?
I think slightly, but not really. And the nice thing about clay is that I can build it up. I mean, I'm sorry. The nice thing about slip is that I can build it up with the layers.
Yeah, I think that's a benefit of the hake brush because it's so soft, it won't rub off the layer.
Yeah, it's so absorbent too.
Yeah.
All right, well, that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna set this aside and we're gonna let it dry, and then I'll come in and I'll paint the next color down here, which will be for the main part of it. But now I want to share with y'all, like once the piece is slit, I want to share how I break it down or make my guides. And what I do is I use food coloring. I like to buy the one that comes as gel, and I work with it kind of like watercolor. Like I'll just squeeze it into a little bowl, and every time I have to use it, put some water in it and resaturate it. And it's like watercolor, like it'll dry up and then you just add water and it becomes liquid again. So I'm working right now with blue food coloring. And why I chose food coloring is because when I was in undergrad, I would use watercolor to make guides for myself because my patterns are pretty, like they're repetitive and they're kind of organized. So most of them, how I organize them is through kind of like a grid. And so I was using watercolor, but then I found that a lot of watercolor actually has oxides in it. And so after the bisque, I could still see the lines. And then since I was working with low fire, it didn't get too hot and it wouldn't actually burn away. So I found that food coloring completely disappears. So that's what I've been working with now. So I have these two terracotta cups that I slipped last night. And so, you know, while it's spinning on the wheel, I'll just slip the top. And I always leave a little bit of room here at the top because I don't want to carve all the way into the rim. I want maybe like, I don't know, 1 millimeter to still be smooth and not carved because that's where your lips are going to go. And then, so I throw the cup and I leave quite a bit of clay at the bottom and then I just trim it away. And after I'm done trimming, I'll smooth it out. And that's when I apply the underglaze because it's already upside down and spinning. So that's when I'll do the yellow underglaze. And it's kind of funny that, you know, I'm using underglaze for this and I'm using slip for this. They're both yellow and they actually come out firing pretty similarly. But with the underglaze, it's just a thinner. So I don't have to, it's a thinner layer application. So I don't have to carve too deep because you do have to watch out when you're doing sgraffito. Unless you're going for really deep texture, then, you know, you can carve as deep as you want. But I definitely have to be careful with the pressure that I apply because you can go through the bottom of a piece.
Now, when you apply the underglaze and the slip, do you have to be really careful of the window of time that you apply each of them, or does one of those give you more flexibility for dryness and wetness of the clay? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah. So slip gives me the most flexibility. But so what I'll do is I'll work with batches, and then, you know, these cups are nice because I'll paint the outside, and even when they're wet, I can just slip my fingers right underneath them, pick them up and move them away. And then I'll do the next cup. And then I just cover them in plastic. And this slip right now it's not sticky. I can press my finger into it and it doesn't sink in or anything. So it's I would say it's like leather hard, and that's the perfect consistency for carving. That's when I can get the cleanest lines. And also with this clay that I'm working with, I like to buy clay that doesn't have any grog in it, which grog is like sand. It also makes your clay body stronger. So stonewares tend to have a lot of grog. I like to buy clay that doesn't have grog so that when I carve or when I draw on it, when I do sgraffito, it's smooth. It's smooth like butter. And so, because when I was in undergrad, I was working with stoneware, and my lines just weren't that clean because there's all that grog when you're drawing through it that can make your line go off. So this piece, I'm gonna break it down to make a pattern like this one. So I'll show y'all the guides that I do. And this one just has the foot that's been underglazed. Oh, and those are the smiley faces I do. Maybe I'll go back to doing it based on my emotions, because emotions are good. So I'm gonna show y'all how I get the piece ready to carve something like this. So I want to get it centered, but I'm not, you know, when I was in undergrad, I tried to be perfect about everything, but I let that go. Because, you know, these are handmade and I'm not a machine. I think like if people want ceramics that are perfect, then you have to go buy manufactured ceramics. But I make pieces, and whatever they want to be, they be. I just guide them, I guess. I shape them. So I don't stress too much about being like a perfectionist anymore, and just kind of go with the flow. So I'm just using that watered down food coloring. And this one is blue. So I'm gonna break up the center. And then these are really awesome. They have them at the ceramic store and probably most of your pottery providers, ceramic supply stores. These are discs that are for separating pieces. I recently bought this small one because forever I've been using this big one. But you know, for pieces, it's a little more complicated, or for smaller ones. So it just helps you break it up into, and they have an even and an odd one. I like to use even. So I have this small one, and you just place it, line it up, center it on the lip of the piece. And then I can see this one that I separated it into 6 equal parts because half of it shows you 3. So I'm going to separate it by 6. And I'm being pretty gentle so as to not really dig into the slip right now. It's just, I'm just really painting it.
Yes, these plate divider, I think they're called plate dividers, but they are awesome. If you don't have one, they're game changers if you do divisional design or fluting or any kind of altering. They're awesome. They're a little bit expensive, but it's worth it.
Yeah. So this is how I plan a piece like this. And then I'm gonna let it dry a little bit and I can show you how I plan out a more complex design. So this one is a little bit more tricky. And every time I do it, I learn something new. Like I'm still getting the hang of it. I'm by no means an expert on this. I'm still getting like a hang of it. But this one, this texture, I really appreciate it because the texture of the carving really comes through. And I really enjoy doing that. And I try to be intentional with the directions of my carvings as well. You know, like you can see that this one was all carved vertically. I leave the walls probably like, I would say like an eighth of an inch thick. Yeah, I mean, you can see right here a little bit about the thickness. I do try to leave it thick, but sometimes when I carve, I can put my hand in it and you can kind of feel how deep you're carving a little bit. You feel like vibrations inside. It's weird. But I try to make my pieces not too thick because then it's more likely to crack if you have like a difference in thickness throughout the piece. But I guess it is on a thicker side. I don't really like the thinner pots that I make are probably like to make mugs and stuff like that. So this one. Break this one up into 8. And FYI, I'm living with my parents and this is the front room. So if they walk in, you know, it's just them getting home. And then this one, since this pattern has some kind of like straight lines going through it, I'll just hold it up and just, I don't know, just let the piece kind of guide my hand. And I just pull my arm upwards and break it up into sections. Some of the best advice I received in undergrad was to trust your eyes, that our eyes are actually pretty good at like breaking things up and visualizing a straight line and also like the shape and the size of something. So now I'm looking at where the horizontal lines are going to go, like here and down here. And I think using food coloring is a really great way to prepare the surface for any sort of carving. Like even if you're adding texture to a piece, you can use the food coloring and organize it before you go all in.
Did you say why you liked using the blue in particular?
It came with different colors, but I think, yeah, this is the blue. Since I've been working with yellow slip, I've been using the blue. But when I work with blue slip, I think there's a red one that I like to use. But it can be tricky on darker colors because sometimes you won't see the guides if you let the piece dry out for a couple of days. The food coloring will kind of fade away. So I normally do this right before I'm gonna carve. So the other piece is now ready. Oh, and let me show y'all my carving tools. So I like to use this tool that has like a little round ball at the end. And this is what I use for line making. I don't know if you can see it.
Did you add like a cover to your handle?
Yes. Since, you know, when I work, I tend to work in batches. So I'll make a couple pieces at a time. My hand will get really tired. So I added Band-Aids to all my tools so it's a little more comfortable. I need to go buy those squishy things they put on pencils. I need to buy some of those because that would be really useful. So really this is how I make my lines. And I like to use the bigger end because they have a finer one. And then for carving, I just use these really cheap, ooh, you can't see it. It's just a little loop. But they're super affordable. I think it's like $10 for a pack of like 5 of these, maybe even less. But now since I know that I only use the loop one, the smaller loop, I really only buy loop tools. And then sometimes I use this guy, which has a little, the carvings are a little deeper. But I find this one's really easy to keep a straight line if I'm trying to make one.
How do you recommend people like choose their carving tools? Like, what's that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just try to understand what kind of carvings and textures you're going for. I know these ones with the ball on the end are meant for sgraffito, but I know people that also use like just a needle tool for carving. I find that this gives you a softer line, a more defined line, whereas a needle tool, you're kind of digging, like scratching into the clay. But if that's what you're going for, then go for it. But definitely just think about what kind of texture and I guess what kind of image you're trying to carve. So, yeah, so when I start, I just use the guides that I made for myself and I just go for it. And I like to position my hand, yeah, I can get closer, to where it's whatever angle I'm making is comfortable for my hand. And I love carving this clay. It's my favorite. It's so smooth. I definitely need to make more time-lapse videos of carving clay, but it's just hard because I'm always listening to music. Music is a very important part of my creative process.
What kind of music do you listen to?
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of cumbia. Specifically psychedelic cumbia. It's really interesting. And then of course I listen to reggaeton because I like the energy, you know, it just gets you moving. So I'll go around and do the first kind of edge of that petal. And then based on that, I'll do the other edge. And whenever you carve like this, you create these little burrs.
Can we see a super close up of that?
Yes. So
Yeah.
you create these little burrs, and you want to knock them off pretty gently, because if not, since the clay is so dark, it will scratch the surface and it can make like put some of that terracotta onto the slip. So you do have to be a little careful. Sometimes I'll just wait for it to completely dry, and then I just use a brush to knock them all off. Whenever I'm working with really large batches, I do try to protect my lungs, especially when it gets more on the dried side, because then it's like you're carving through dust. So I do normally wear a mask when I'm doing a lot of carving in one day.
What do you do if you mess up a line?
Sometimes you can just go with it, but it's just practice makes perfect. I know my designs are pretty organized and like tight, so I just try to like really be in the zone and take it slow. I just, like I'm not pushing my hand to do anything crazy, or I mean, it's really just practice. But I do enjoy doing designs that aren't as organized, because then you can just, do whatever.
Do all of the tools that you use for carving work on slip and underglaze?
Yes. Yes.
And how do you manage like the wetness and dryness of your pieces to make it just that right consistency for carving?
Yeah. So whenever I slip or underglaze them, I'll let them sit out until I can touch them and it's not wet. And then I just put them in a plastic bag. I'll store them, a couple of them in a plastic bag, and just fold it up. And then by the next day, it's perfect. It sucks whenever I'll like forget to cover them up, because once it gets too dry, it'll just flake off. So your lines can be really crumbly. So that's the only thing you're trying to avoid. You don't want it to get too dry. And if it's ever too wet, just sit the piece out, and in like 10 minutes, it'll be ready. But every clay body is different. So every clay body has like a different like moisture control. And I've found that working with earthenware is my favorite, because it tends to stay wet the longest. Like that bigger piece that I was slipping earlier, I trimmed that piece last night, but I finished it. Like I made the form probably like last week, and I just kept it in a bag, in a plastic bag. I know some people make like wet boxes out of just like plastic containers, but I don't know.
Like how much pressure would you say you're using?
I would describe it like the pressure that you use whenever you're writing with a pencil. Although I know, like, when I used to draw, I used to like really push down to where it would like push into the paper. I don't do that anymore because it hurts my hand. So it's some pressure, but I'm still being mindful, because the deeper I go, the harder it'll be to get a clean line.
The deeper you go, the harder it will be to get a clean line, because you'll get a bigger burr.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever retrace the line, like to go deeper? Or?
Most of the time I'll do that with the loop tool. Yeah. Like sometimes my petals will, like I have some days where I'll be carving and everything's lopsided. So sometimes you can fix that with, once I'm carving out the negative space. But yeah, I just try to be present when I work and tap into that flow.
We're just enjoying watching you carve here. It's very meditative.
Yeah, and it's been really nice, like learning to slow down. I feel like when I was in undergrad, I was just trying to pump a bunch of pots out. And now that I've been able to manage my own time, I take my time with it. And if my hand gets tired, if my butt gets tired from sitting, I just take a break. Because sometimes I will be in a headspace where, like, this does take a certain like degree of like patience, and some days you're just off. So now I'm using the loop tool to carve into it. And normally I do this over my wheel so that the splash pan catches all the crumbs, but trying to be close with y'all.
Can we see a super duper close up again? Just like super close so we can see how deep it is.
Yes,
cool.
I'll try.
Yeah, that looks great.
So I'll try to go as deep as the first carving that I made with the smaller tool. And then I just follow that line. And I like to go around and outline the petals, and then I go back in and take out all the other slip in the negative space.
Do you ever carve through wax so you can inlay color into the carved lines? I guess that would be called mishima.
Yeah, I have done it before. I have excuse me, during the quarantine when I was out of a studio, I started making weird stuff because I didn't have a wheel then. So I started pinching and making all these sculptures, and I did do some of that. I made like these little, and this was stoneware. And so I just like inlaid bright orange. But it's so different from my work that now I have like no idea how to finish it. So I'm just letting it stay here, and eventually it'll get glazed. But yeah, that's definitely a technique that I've considered, because I thought about like, whoa, like what if I did inlay on just the carvings and the petals? That would be so cool. Thanks for the idea. I might do that.
What other ceramic artists do you look at for inspiration?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I mean, after I graduated, I've been trying to be more intentional about what art I allow to influence me. So, you know, I've been trying to do more research on the indigenous art of like nearby my hometown and in Mexico. I have this really great book of wooden carved stamps that they found from Mexico. And sometimes I'll just look through it, and based on some of the textures, they'll inspire different carvings. So I guess for artists, it would be like here in Houston, there's a really great collection of Native American pottery at the Museum of Fine Arts. So that is always super inspiring. I definitely really enjoy the work of Molly Ann Bishop, which was one of the demonstrating artists a couple weeks ago here through Sonoma. Because she has, like, she draws and then she translates that into clay. And that would be so cool if I could find a way to incorporate like my drawings into my pieces. I like her work. I went to a workshop with Adam Field, and that was really cool because I got to see how he carves on porcelain. And he'll just carve, I mean, similar patterns to this, but he carves it straight onto the clay. But he was like next level. He used a laser level and fancy stuff. But it was really neat to see how he worked too, and get to meet him and see his studio in Montana.
Do you sharpen your tools or replace them?
I do replace them quite, I mean, after heavy use, it definitely will wear down and it'll catch onto the clay more. So it's not as easy to carve. So you do, I mean, I'll wear mine down till it literally breaks in the middle. Like it's no longer a loop, it breaks. And then I just replace them. But since it is metal, I think it's pretty durable. And you know, I don't like, I mean, I don't know. I've tried those really fancy tools like the diamond, whatever tools, and sometimes they just carve too deep for what I'm doing. Because those are super sharp. They're super sharpened. So I just buy these.
Do you happen to remember the name of the book that had the Mexican wooden stamps?
Ooh, I can go grab it. It's upstairs. I'll grab it at the end and show y'all. I don't remember the book.
Thank you.
I think it's called like Motifs of Mexico or something like that, but I can grab it. It's upstairs. Yeah, I think there's so much wealth of knowledge already out there. You know, like clay is one of the earliest art forms ever, and this technology, you know, and its processes and working with it has existed for so long that, you know, like pre-Columbian cultures and even cultures that still exist today, like there's so much wealth of knowledge of working with it and having a different perspective on it too. Because I feel like in college you learned a lot about like Japanese pottery and those kind of aesthetics, but I just really wasn't into stoneware. You know, I'm looking for really bright colors. I did a bunch of graffiti on my undergrad, and then it would go to cone 10 reduction firing and it would come out so dull. But then I feel like there's also this like stigma on low fire clay, you know, like is it craft or is it art?
I know a lot of people will question like the durability or functionality of low fire clay and glazes. What is your answer to those questions?
I mean, there's still like terracotta pots from thousands of years together, or, you know, like in one piece today. So I don't know. Cause I think about like the people who used to work, like who work with Mayolica and on like earthenware, and it's still around today. I definitely want to take some of those classes with the ceramics online workshop materials. And they like teach you more about like the science and the chemistry behind clay and glaze.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really up to like, your glaze and how, like if it's food safe or whatever. And it's about like the surface and firing it to the right temperature.
When you're removing the slip in those larger areas, do you consider the direction of the lines, or what do you?
Yeah,
what are you
yeah,
doing
I
there?
absolutely do. And I guess you can see that more in this cup. Like it was all vertical lines. Normally I'll, and you can see right there that I ran out of space. So it's not perfect, that's okay. And I'll go ahead and do the bottom.
So this is the underglaze, remember?
Yeah.
Kind of looking identical, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little more concentrated, but once it's fired, it's really about the same. But I'm already noticing that I'm having to apply a lot more pressure on the underglaze because I painted it last night. So it's a little bit more dry than the slip. So my carving tool just doesn't slide as smoothly. So I have to be more mindful.
So there's a question about what clear glaze you use, and I'll just say that the clear glaze recipe is in the tool list PDF, and I'll send that with the recording when I email that to you.
Yeah, and when I was in undergrad, and also when I had access to a studio and raw materials, I did mix my own glazes. And then I would always spray the clear. Like if you're mixing your own clear, I would always spray the clear onto the piece so that you get as thin as possible, because if not, it can cloud. Ever since I haven't had access to a studio like that, I've just been using commercial clear, like low fire commercial clear. And it's super easy because you just literally brush it on.
What brand do you use?
And
you can show us in a minute if it's easier.
It's right here. I think it's Amico. So it's that bubblegum pink glaze, but it's clear transparent.
LG, what does that say? LG 10, clear transparent.
Yeah.
All right. Go Amico.
Yep. And I have had issues with their glaze. You don't want to put it on too thick. Or, you know, since I have all these recesses, I have to be mindful of when I'm glazing it. If it gets too thick and it pulls somewhere, it tends to bubble. So I only do about 2 coats of the glaze. So you can see this is forming a lot more burrs than the other one. And I'm just gonna leave them there until it's in the way of my hand. And I don't really remember where this spiral idea came from, but it's really interesting because I was looking in that book of the Mexican stamps, and there is a motif that they used quite often of spirals. So I was like, huh, it does make sense.
Yeah, I think it's a great connection to your heritage, and like the sun also. That really reminds me of just like that yellow dot, intense yellow dot.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, I love yellow. Yellow is my favorite color. So that's that. And then I'll just carve this guy out. I like to start at the edges. And remember, this is the foot of the cup, so I'm trying to be mindful of not going too deep. And I guess like sgraffito is when I carve the lines, but really I guess what I'm doing is like relief carving onto ceramics, which is interesting because I do relief printing as well. And I really enjoy carving the linoleum because it reminds me so much of this. But linoleum carving tools are so much sharper and dangerous.
Are you still doing any block printing?
I've been feeling pretty inspired lately, so I think I am. I want to go buy some and do some new designs, but I have like a box full of like carved ones already. But I haven't been printing at all. I've just been, ideas have been moving around in my head. It's so quiet. I'm always listening to music. Y'all should check out, there's this group called the Meridian Brothers, and they make a psychedelic cumbia. It's good. I really enjoy the energy. It's definitely high energy, so it really pumps me up.
Someone had suggested a playlist, so you'll have to give
Yeah.
us some more suggestions.
Yeah. Oh, I have a lot of playlists on Spotify that I definitely want to share with y'all.
Cool. We can share that in the email too.
Yeah,
What
definitely.
was the name of that band that you just said, or the group?
The Meridian Brothers. It's weird stuff, so be ready.
What do you do with the clay scraps that's mixed with the underglaze and slip?
Yeah, if it falls somewhere where it doesn't get like contaminated with, I don't know, just like others, like if it falls on the ground, I'll try to sweep it up when it's leather hard, so before it's like really dry, so you don't create a lot of dust. I try to sweep it up and I'll just throw it away. Everything that falls on my wheel head, I'll just toss it. I have a bunch of buckets full of clay. I'll just toss it in there and then it comes up like confetti in your clay. But I actually haven't started recycling all of my clay, so I don't know, I'll see how it goes. But yeah, I just re-moisturize it and recycle it.
The pot that's in the background, that it's a 3-tiered with the black squiggly line. You were looking at it kind of.
Oh yeah, the one I was showing you earlier.
Yeah, is that totally free form, that line? Or is
The
it
squiggly line, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
yeah, that one I just go at it.
Yeah.
And then when I start carving is, on the bigger areas, I'll leave like little dots there. Yeah, that's one of my favorite patterns to carve. It's so fun. So the bottom is finished. The burrs will leave some texture, and then once it's drier, I just go back in and clean it up. But for now, that's good. So now I'll finish
See a
this.
super close up at the bottom.
Yeah. So there's the foot, and then it's on the bottom.
Nice.
And I think I really enjoy the working with relief because of your experience with like touching it. And I definitely want to have a show that's called like Touch My Pots because it's unfortunate. I mean, I get it. I get that like why galleries don't want people like touching the artwork. I get it. But it'd be so cool like to be intentional with that and purposely make pots that are meant to be touched. Because it's a different experience. It's funny, when I had my solo show, I had a lot of friends and family friends that went, and my mom was just like picking pots up like that were on display. She would just like pick them up and look at the signature underneath, just like nothing. And some people would like be confused, like what's she doing? But it was funny.
Can you tell us about where we can buy your work or commission, how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for commissions, you can always slide into my DMs on Instagram. You can also email me, which I don't know if you shared my email with everyone, but it's also on my Instagram, my email, or I can provide that later. But right now I have work available through Form and Concept Gallery in New Mexico, and I can send links to that. I was going to share some. And then I have some work available, also some smaller stuff through this online retailer called like Arrow, but without the W, Arrow. Adult Shop. And I've been selling through her for 2 years now. And it's been so cool seeing how my pieces have changed from just pieces I made like a year ago. But she's really awesome. They also have like amazing local handmade jewelry.
I like how you've been photographing your pots on the solid color backgrounds.
Yeah.
I think it really works for your overall vibe and like presentation. It's just so fun. How did you arrive at that?
I found this account. It's called Chupa Rosa. And I think it's a couple that makes pots and they're based in a border town. And they used a lot of orange. And I found their account and looked at how colorful everything is. And I just loved it. And I was like, I want to do that. But I have an obsession with a checkerboard right now. So the way I lay out my Instagram, it'll be like 2 different colors and it's checkered.
Nice.
Yeah, and really all I use is like craft paper. Like I went to the art supply store, bought like 2 yards of each color. That's all I use. And then I mean with phones these days, you can do so much editing without needing Photoshop, or you can even edit your images on Instagram and then just save it. I know my saturation is definitely off in some of those pictures, but because it's so much color. But I love it.
You prefer working with galleries versus your own site or Etsy?
I guess when I moved to Houston, there was a gallery that I was working with, so I just assumed that was what I was gonna do. But you know, this year has been really hard, and that gallery just kind of fell apart. So now I'm really on my own. And I mean, I'm privileged enough that, you know, like my parents are supportive and, you know, they allowed me to take up this space in their home so I can keep making. Because it's really like therapy for me. Like I go crazy if I can't work with pots. But I am thinking about doing an Etsy maybe before the holidays. There's this really awesome artist. Her name on Instagram, it's Lolly Lolly Ceramics. And she did a project of 100 mugs. It's super cool. She was working with like a black clay and she did crazy handles on all of them. So she made 100 mugs and they're all different. And that inspired me. So now I want to make 100 cups, but like 100 terracotta and then 100 earthenware. So I'm starting to plan that out and hopefully get that finished before the holidays. And then, yeah, either do like Instagram sell or Etsy. I think Etsy would probably be easier. But I definitely want to be, like, I want to start selling for myself. Because, you know, like galleries and shops often take a cut, which is fair. I get it. And you can price your work accordingly to that. But I don't know. It still feels weird selling cups for like $30. Yeah, so I flipped it because it's just easier for me to carve that way. How are we on time?
You have 45 minutes left.
Nice. Yeah, it's pretty time intensive carving all of these. Most of the time I work in batches of about 15 cups at a time, and it'll definitely take me like 2 days to finish carving.
Yeah, you spend a lot of time on those. I hope you get more than $30 for them.
That's like wholesale prices.
Yeah. Is the Arrow Shop Arrow Home on Instagram?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's based in Austin. I also have a link that I can email to you all later.
Yeah, I found it. Their website link from Instagram isn't working,
Oh no.
but their Instagram's working.
Yeah, if you go to their collections and then you go to home, their home collection, they have some ceramics. And then Form and Concept has like larger pieces. So they're more expensive. It's definitely, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
How do you determine pricing?
I had a friend who really helped me like break it down, like based on what clay you're working with, how time intensive the design is, your attention to the liner glaze, to the foot ring. And she helped me break it down. And as I get better, I think it's okay to charge more for your craft. But we established that like, well, I mean, you know, it's all subjective, but I feel that like the base price of any handmade object, like a cup or a mug, should start at 30. And then for every additional thing that you do to it, for example, like a carved foot, like $5. You carve the bottom, $5 more, you know? So you just like add and add. And then as you get better, I think it's totally okay to raise your prices. Especially because I feel like there's some pots out there that are really cheap, you know? And I understand trying to make it accessible, but also like if you're trying to do this as a living, or I don't know, if I was selling $30 cups, I would never be able to do this as a living, you know? So you have to be realistic and value your craft and the time and the energy you put into your pieces. I think once I started feeling really good about my work, that's when I started taking pricing a lot more seriously, because this is like how I'm paying myself. And I don't know, I mean, I was at a studio school for a little bit. It was like a community studio. And I would see how much they would charge for like paintings, you know, like thousands of dollars for a pretty simple painting. So I was like, why don't we have expensive pottery too, you know? I don't know, the way I see it is like pots are so unique, especially when they're handmade. And if you're making one-off pieces, whoa, that should be extra pricey because it's unique. There's no other piece in the world that looks like it. All right, so this piece is finished. So I'm just gonna let the burrs dry, and then I'll go back in with a brush that has harder bristles, and then you can just knock all of that off. Sometimes what's up?
You would do that like tomorrow or something? Or
yeah, like later today.
Mhm.
Sometimes when I mess up, you can go back in and add some slip to it. But I haven't found a way to correct my errors without making it super obvious. Yeah, so I just try to be present, and doing that, being more mindful, it helps me not make any mistakes. So that one's done. I think I want to finish slipping the big one. Or do the next color. So this piece, I made it in 2 pieces. You can't really see the seam anymore, but this was actually 2 bowls that I then combined. And that's how I make those bigger pieces in the back too. I don't know if you can see them. It's all section through.
Do you ever make mugs with handles?
I do, but I haven't found a way of incorporating sgraffito into a mug because of how I painted on the wheel. So if there's a mug, I don't know, but I might try doing that soon. It seems really challenging. And you know, with mugs, I don't know, I don't make a lot of mugs. But that's a good idea. So when you're working with slip, the colors always look pretty dull. But once it's fired, the colors will be different and more saturated. So it's always a good idea to do test tiles. I just make pieces as test tiles. Like I'll test it out on a cup or a bowl. And slowly I've been finding like what colors look better together.
Do you know how long this piece is going to take you to carve?
Definitely probably like 2 full days. But I mean, you know, I'm putting in like 4 hours at the studio every day. I bet I could do it in 8 hours. Yeah, it's definitely very time intensive. And I have to constantly remind myself to respect my body more. And, you know, as soon as I feel tired, just not push it.
Yeah, that's when the mistakes happen a lot of times.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about your schooling and your background with learning clay?
Sure. In high school, I took a couple of sculpture classes and I messed around with a lot of different things, but I learned how to coil build and I learned how to do sgraffito. But back then we were using sgraffito to carve or to scratch like self-portraits. So it was more representational and more detail oriented. And then I grew up really sheltered. And also, I don't know, it's like a different dynamic coming from like a family of immigrants. Like I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things. So when I was gonna graduate high school, I was like, I gotta get out of here. You know, just like be independent and make my own choices without feeling guilty about it. So I saw that San Marcos here in Texas, it's like 30 minutes away from Austin, that they had a ceramics program. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. So I went for it. And I didn't even bother to tour the campus or anything. I just applied, I got in, moved into my dorm, and I just like fell in love with the program because the ceramics program was really small. And the professor, Michelle Conroy, she recently retired, but she's like this small but strong woman. She used to be like a speed skater. So we would go ice skating with her. She was just a badass and she inspired me and she helped me make like my first ever big pots. And it was just such a great community. So I fell in love with it and I stuck with it. And I mean, I'm really grateful that I still have the space to make, after graduating from school. But it definitely took it took me like at least a semester to be good at throwing like a simple cylinder, at least. And even then I still make mistakes. Like, don't get me wrong. I am no master. And it didn't take me till it was a 5-year program. And on my senior year is when I figured out like what style I was even going for, what colors I wanted, what I want, like what messages I'm trying to convey with my art. Like it took me 5 years to figure that out. And I definitely feel now that I have sort of like an established style, but it still gives me enough wiggle room to come up with new ideas and carve different things and create new patterns. Yeah, so I've been working with clay for a little over 6 years now. Yeah, and I just really love it. Throwing is so therapeutic for me. Like some days I like, well, I would say most days I'm doing this for myself, It's like so relaxing. And I feel so gratified when I can just flow with something and get into that flow. I'm still thinking about grad school, but it would also be really cool to do some residencies in Mexico. I've traveled a little bit, but mostly like central Mexico. I've been to like Guanajuato, Querétaro, like central states like that, but it'd be so cool to visit Oaxaca and Puebla. There's some pretty cool residencies in Mexico that I would love to do.
Yeah, it seems like that would be so beneficial to you and your work. There's a question about how you keep those colors separated, like the different banding colors.
Yeah, I'm careful and mindful when I am in that area. And even if they can blend, most of the time the designs will require like a carving, like to carve that edge. So I won't worry about it too much. But you got to be mindful with the brush and how you're moving that slip onto the piece.
When you finish this piece, will you post it on Instagram or share?
Absolutely. Yeah. It always takes a while because I have to get it fired twice. So it probably won't be ready until December, honestly. Just because I have to make enough work to fill the kiln at a time. So yeah, it's been tricky. It's been tricky being out of a studio, like a community space, because then you have to coordinate so many things. I don't have my own kiln. So I'm paying like for a while, like when I was working on some like cups for that shop, I was firing about like once a week. Right now I slowed down a little bit. But it is really challenging not having a kiln. And I never realized how challenging that was till the corona hit and everything got shut down. This is taking longer than I expected, but I can go ahead and carve another cup. That might be more entertaining. I'm gonna let this dry and then I'll do the bottom purple layer.
Is there any instances when you might not apply that slip through the banding or through the spinning wheel, like small areas or anything?
Sometimes I'll do little dots like for eyeballs, but then I'll just use like a Q-tip to apply that underglaze. So most of the time I do use the wheel for that. So this one is gonna look like this guy. And this is the blue slip, but I'm carving these with yellow slip. Oh, I think my phone is dying. Is it back on now?
It's on, yeah.
Okay, that was weird. So I'll be carving this piece.
This is the step design. I call it the step design. Is it?
This one's a little tricky. Yeah, this is definitely a very time-intensive process. It looks way cooler when it's like a time lapse, because it makes it seem like it takes like 5 minutes. Hey, do you have a charger that I can borrow? Yeah. I'm gonna plug in my phone really quick so it can charge. I think it died.
She did not talk about layering colors, but we can ask her that when she comes back. I think she always keeps them separate. But you could certainly blend or do anything else like that. So cute.
Yeah, we have a Yorkie. Apparently they're one of the loudest breeds. He's very expressive. Oh, so layering colors. Yeah, that would certainly be interesting. I think I tried that in undergrad where I would do a single color and then another over it. And then I'd carefully just carve away that first layer. But it's a lot of work. So normally I just stick to a single color. But that would certainly be interesting, like as far as like the depth of that surface, if you did like a couple of underglazes or a couple of slips and then carve through it, because you would see all the layers. I know some people do that and then they like sand it down and it looks really cool. So this edge can be a little tricky. You know, and another texture that I've been getting into is carving actual text onto my work. And if y'all go on my Instagram, y'all can see some pictures from my thesis show that I had for my undergrad. And I made these 2 really big pieces. They were the biggest pieces I had ever made. And I carved my own poetry onto it. So just how I use the wheel to paint bands of color, that's what I did, but on a big piece. So it was really easy with the spinning wheel because I could get all the different stripes of color. And then I would break that down and I carved words into it. They were big pieces, but I actually didn't fit the entire poem onto them. if you're in Austin and they have one of those pieces at the Proper Hotel. I actually haven't gone to go see it. I should.
Do you ever use the food coloring to draw the design instead of just the grid?
No, I just go for it. Because I guess I incorporated the food coloring later on. Like when I started, I would just do a mandala, and if it was lopsided or anything, I just went with it. And then I started thinking about ways of organizing it better and making the design seem more organized. So I adopted the food coloring. I guess sometimes when the pattern is based in a circle, I will do the outline with food coloring so you can stay within that shape.
Would you recommend any low-tech way to spray the clear glaze, like if you don't have a spray booth?
Yeah, I think they sell it's like a little cup and then it has like a straw attachment and you can like blow it. Yeah, that would be it. I mean, do it outside.
Yeah.
But they sell it. I know they sell it and you use your own air to blow it onto there.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why I use commercial glazes, because it's so easy to just brush them on and you can like literally do it anywhere. They're also like non-toxic, so I don't worry too much about getting it on stuff or.
But you brush it even, it's pretty direct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy. And I used to feel weird about that, about like when I was in undergrad, I would mix my own stuff because I feel like there was this like hierarchy, but I choose not to let that judgment guide my practice anymore. And whatever is most accessible to me, that's what I use. So I've been using a lot of commercial glazes. And you know what you're gonna get, like when I was doing stoneware high fire, sometimes the glaze wouldn't come out right or the color came out different. So working with low fire, working with commercial glazes and an electric firing where the atmosphere is oxidation and it's pretty controlled, the results are more guaranteed. And I still like to play around with stoneware every now and then. Sometimes when I get in a creative block, I'll just push myself to make really weird pots. Or I'll work with clay that has a lot of grog in it and I'll pinch it. So it kind of, it motivates me and I come up with more ideas too when I'm working and making other things that are really different. I definitely get the most ideas when I'm working, like when I'm making.
How long do you usually carve before you feel the fatigue in your hands?
Probably like 3 to 5 hours. And then I'll take a break in between. And I mean, for some reason, I really crave this technique. Like it really gratifies my brain and makes my brain feel good. So sometimes I like want to do it. So I'll do it all day. But definitely when I mean, it definitely takes a toll, because if I do it consistently for a couple days in a row, I'll definitely notice that my hand will be just a little sore. Or it's really just my fingers. I have like weird blisters from how I hold it, how I use this tool the most. I think someone made like yoga for potters. I need to check it out. That'd be so helpful.
Yeah, some stretches or something for your hands would be good, probably.
Yeah, I always try to be self-aware of my hand positions when I'm throwing, trimming, all steps of the process. Like if something hurts, I'll stop doing that. Because, you know, like I work with my hands, so they're really important. So I have to like respect them and how they feel.
I can tell, well, there's a question about how you hold your hands, and I can tell you're like resting it on your pinky with this one, but do you have a different technique with the larger?
No, I tend to use my pinky to guide it. Yeah, I always try to have some support with my other hand or with this hand when I work. It's really similar to whenever I draw. It's like I'm drawing on clay. Do the bottom now. I think how I came up with this kind of like doodle font, I would just grab a Sharpie and just on paper, just like write letters, but kind of abstract them. And yeah, that's how I came up with this. It's just being loose, because I feel like most of the patterns are so tight. So I have to find a way to get away from that and through other techniques. So I'm always trying to explore different shapes and different line making, different textures. Normally when I carve, I work on the wheel, and I'll have a bigger piece of foam that I can rest the cup on, and it'll just sit there and then I'll carve. It's a little easier. So I'm just gonna clean up the burrs a little bit. I used to use my hand to clean it up, but sometimes you will smear it. So you gotta be careful. It's better to use a brush, but it does create dust. So when I'm doing this all day, I do wear a mask. And that's also why I try to avoid letting it dry out too much, because the drier it gets, the more dust creates. So that's all the sgraffito. Now it's time to carve away. So I'll be using the loop tool.
Do you ever just leave it at this stage?
No. I love carving with the loop tool so much. But sometimes when I am working in large batches, I will leave it at the stage and like just do all this graffito, set it aside, and then the next day I'll carve away. Because I think as far as like how important the dryness is for the quality of line, like that window is smaller for sgraffito. And then for the loop tool for carving, sometimes you can do that the day afterwards. So this one's pretty tricky. I'll start with the bottom.
We're kind of nearing the end, Gabo. I just wanted to give you a 10-minute heads up.
Okay. Yeah, if y'all have any questions, feel free to come on and ask them. También en español, sin miedo.
Thank you.
Yeah. Y'all can ask me anything.
What's your life's dream as an artist?
Oh, man. You know, I feel with everything going on, like the political climate of things, it made me realize how important it is to create safe spaces. So my dream ultimately would be, because I have done some teaching. I teach at a smaller community space here in Houston. But, you know, I feel like in my experience, most of the people, I don't know, I don't see a lot of people like me, you know? So I would love to create spaces that do have workshops in Spanish or classes that are in Spanish and just more accessible to more diversity. So my dream would be to have like a creative studio space where I can invite people of all backgrounds to come and really have fun. Just have fun with it and not take it so seriously. But business-wise, I don't know if y'all follow Bari Zipperstein on Instagram. She's a ceramic designer. And that's like my dream, is to design planters and like larger pots and then have like a manufacturing company. But it would also be handmade. So I would want to hire like young artists and pay them well and just design a bunch of ceramics. That'd be pretty cool. And it would be even sweeter if I could relocate that to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a dream of starting like a art center in my hometown because they have like a library culture center. But I would love to be able to teach art to young kids in my hometown. That'd be really cool. I feel like art has the power to heal. So it's like, it's not fair that it's not accessible to everyone. And I do think it's awesome though that people are going out of the way to try to make it more accessible. Like you guys with the offering the $5 class. That's awesome.
Are you comfortable with sharing your age? Because your wisdom is so great.
Yeah. I'm an old soul. I'm 25. And it's funny because right now, you know, with everything happening, me and all my siblings, we're all adults, but we're still living at home with our parents. And it's like we're constantly reminded that, you know, we gotta adult and, you know, like the normal things that are, I guess, like assumed, you know, like growing up, getting a house, getting married. So it's like weird because we're like in that in-between phase of like, I don't know, it's just we're in the in-between, and it's like it's been interesting having conversations with them and like, you know, thinking about what we want for the future and like if we even see ourselves like staying here. Cause it is, life is pretty different in Mexico. And most of my family is still over there. So I think about that often, like relocating. Just finding like a sense of home, I guess. Yeah.
It sounds like you really have the capacity and drive to create something that would be that would give a lot of people like you a sense of home and belonging.
Mhm.
I love that. I feel like you're really a great candidate to be that person.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like those of us that have the privilege to be makers, and I have the privilege of having my parents' support and having a home and being able to make, like we have to share that. And it's been really cool, like teaching here and there. Obviously I haven't taught since the beginning of the year, but I feel like a lot of people hold themselves back because they think art is for like creative people, but we're really all creative. You just got to allow yourself like the chance to, I don't know, maybe it's like perfectionism that holds us back, or like fear of failure, but everyone's creative. And
Yeah.
even if you can't draw, like so many people use that as an excuse. Like, I can't draw, so I'm not an artist. Like, what? Have you seen the kind of art people are making? Like anything is art nowadays.
Do you know about any resources that might explore ancient art and pottery use in the Philippines?
Ooh, that's so interesting. I don't, but Google it. I'm sure there is some sort of database. Like I know for pre-Columbian artifacts, they do have a database that is pretty extensive, and it's online, and you can like, it's basically like an online museum. I'm sure they have to have the same, but I mean, I would also suggest looking at museums and stuff like that, or looking at artists who are exploring that heritage.
A lot of museums these days have digital collections, so
Mhm.
you can, well, a couple museums to look at might be the Metropolitan Museum and also the Freer, Freer collection of the Smithsonian. They have a lot of ancient pots, so you could check if you're interested in looking at old pots. It's a really great resources.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how long pots have been around for.
Maybe there's a national museum in the Philippines that would have
Mhm.
a good resource.
Yeah. Or you could also like check out some books, check out your library. They might have some on that. Yeah, I think as someone who is constantly dealing with a lot of cultural and identity issues, because it's like I'm not American, I'm Mexican, but I don't live in Mexico. So it's like this in between. I think it's brought me a lot of peace to make art that is identity based. And although it's not like directly identity based, I think you can still kind of see some of that context in my work. But it's taught me a lot, and I think if you're struggling with those kinds of themes, like look into what your ancestors used to make. And I mean, we all have ancestors. So it's like it's pretty amazing to see like those artifacts, and yeah, and how that inspires you. I always try to like, I don't try to like copy things. But I just let it inspire me and influence me, and yeah.
I like what you said too. You're very careful about what does influence your work or inspire your work, that you're
Yeah.
thinking about, yeah, that you're just very mindful of that. Because I think it's easy to get inspired by all the great stuff that's happening out there.
Yeah. Or overwhelmed too, because you go on Instagram and there's so much stuff. But I definitely try to never try to compare my art to anyone else's. because for me, doing that in the past has never been very positive. So I try to just focus on what I'm doing and build on what I'm doing without comparing myself to others. Like I did a podcast and one of the questions was like how I allow myself to make when there's like all these great makers already making. And I was like, I don't know, I make pots for myself. You know, like everyone can make. You shouldn't limit yourself based on what these other master potters are making, you know, like clay is so malleable, you can make anything.
What do you use to glaze the inside of your pots?
So I use I think it's also Amico. It's like these colorful low fire glazes, and they're like glossy and super colorful. And I mean, I've just been trying to find glazes that work well with terracotta and earthenware. The brighter ones work well with the white clay, but for terracotta, I either do like a red or an orange. I'm not sure if I have an example of the orange, but darker colors that work good and still have nice contrast. Yeah, so in the email that we follow up, I'll include some of my playlists that I have on Spotify. I have some pretty, I mean, it's different. It's a different taste in music, and I'll post a couple of those there. I also like to listen to a lot of podcasts. It's been really helpful, especially right now when we're not socializing as much as we used to. It's really nice to still hear and be part of like meaningful conversations. So I'll definitely share some of that in the email. And I can also share where you can find my work online. Thank you all for being here though. I really appreciate it. It's been nice. Yeah, I just do this all day, every day. Sometimes it does feel like work, but I just take a nap.
Thank you for bringing us all into your studio.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
I think that really shows a lot of resilience and adaptability. I mean, this is like your first studio really that was kind of forced out of moving out of the public studio.
Mhm.
It's great.
Yeah.
It looks really functional.
It's really messy. But yeah, I make it work.
I just wanted to say that I really enjoy this.
Thank you.
You're just so inspirational and so talented, and I just really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us. And your name is very artist also. So
thank you. people criticize it all the time. They're like, why Martini? Do you like martinis? I don't. But it's just catchy. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here with me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really great to just get to know you and see your personality, because it matches so well with the work. And I love when that when I get to know an artist, and it gives me more of a sense of like why their work the way it looks, the way it is, or it feels the way it is. And so you're right on point with those.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to like not take yourself too seriously and be playful.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, clay for me, it reminds me of like being a kid and playing with mud, you know? So like if you can tap into that when you're making work, that's pretty cool. It's pretty, yeah.
Gabo, is there anything else your audience should know about, things that are coming up, or anything you want us to know about?
I mean, definitely keep a lookout on my Instagram for pots for sale. I really want to do that 100-piece challenge to work out some new ideas for cups. I feel like I'm finally at a place where I'm pretty satisfied with the designs and the colors that I'm using. So definitely look out for a holiday sale. But that's about it this year. I don't have a lot going on, but that's okay too. I'm just relaxing and making pots at home.
Sounds like a dream. Love it. Well, thank you everyone. And thank you so much again, Gabo. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming. I mean, your attendance here is employing the people at our studio and employing Gabo. So it's much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you guys.
all for doing this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Sí. Que tengan buen día. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We'll be looking for your posts of the finished pots.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always making.
Well, thanks again, everyone. Be safe out there. I'm going to end the meeting and we hope to see you back again soon for some more classes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Gabo. You're awesome. That was just fantastic. And you've really inspired me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Muchas gracias y salamat po.
De nada, gracias por estar aquí.
Say bye.
Did they say in Spanish?
Y'all are so cute.